Hey teachers! Today I wanted to give you a quick overview of Google Forms, how to create one, where to find student responses, etc. First things first, you'll have to look for the app called Google Forms. If you're working on a district iPad, you can search in self-service. If you're working on a personal iPad or phone, you would search the App Store to look for an icon that looks like this. But please don't worry if you don't see this icon in self-service. It does not mean that you can't use Google Forms. One way to access Forms without the app being present is simply to go to your URL bar and type forms.google.com. This will work on any device with internet access. And the last way that you can access Forms is if you're working on a Chromebook or a laptop or desktop, and you happen to be in Google or Gmail or any other Google app, you'll have this icon that people often nickname the waffle. Click the waffle and scroll down until you see the purple Forms icon. So whichever way you've accessed Google Forms, you'll be led to this page so you can create one that is new. It gives you a bunch of options. You can create one that is completely blank or a quiz that is completely blank. And the difference is that a quiz can be, you can assign point values, you can create an answer key so that it basically grades for you. And it also has a few templates already made if you wanted, to just borrow one of theirs. You can add these sort of headers and colors and things like that in a blank one on your own. That's your call to. Below the plus sign will be any forms that you've already created and are being stored in your Google Drive. So let's take a look at a blank quiz. And that way we can go through all of the elements. So first things first, when you are creating, of course, you've got your palette here to change the color and, do some editing to the appearance of it. But for now, let's just take a look at the actual content of the Google form. So you would give it a title. I'm going to call this one sample quiz or something. And of course, you can add a description if you feel like it. Now you're going to use, it gives you a space to add your first quiz question, and then this plus sign would be where you can add subsequent questions. So it gives you the option when you click in here. Of course, you can type the title, the question itself. In many cases, it's not really a question. Maybe you just simply want to have a space for name, or class period, something like that. It's not necessarily part of the quiz, but a lot of teachers were asking, once the quizzes get submitted to me, how can I sort them by student name? They will be sorted by student email address, which is helpful. At least it's assigned to someone, but unfortunately, many students have very similar email addresses. So unless you know these kids' emails inside and out, you might think, oh, which kids does this belong to? So I would always recommend making the very first question, enter your full name, or maybe the first question would be, a space for first name, and the second question could be the space for last name. Once you start typing, enter. You'll see right here it says multiple choice. That's one of the options. But if we type enter your name, the computer recognized that this is not going to be multiple choice. This is going to be a short answer. So it already gave you the space, or gave the respondents the space to type in this blank space. When we hit the plus sign, we have a few other options. So for example, if we wanted this one to be class period, maybe we could make this one multiple choice, or check boxes, or a drop down menu, or something like that, where the kids could, pull down and select the appropriate class period. So we maybe would type class period. Oops. And then one, I'll just put a couple of options here. 2 and 3. Let's say I teach those 3 periods. We're going to make this required. Oh, and let's go back here. I forgot to make this one required. These do not require an answer key, obviously. So we're going to leave that blank. So now we're ready for another question. Let's put a real question in here. Whoops. I'm going to slide this down. You can always drag and drop the order of your questions. Sort of glad I made that mistake so we can see that. When you put your mouse over those 6 dots right there, you get the 4-arrow cursor that allows you to, pick the question up and relocate it. So that allowed me to correct my error. So now if we typed a multiple choice question, what color is the sky? We could, now this time I'm also going to make the question required, but I'm going to fill in the answer key. That way, this could be one of the questions that Google Forms will grade for me. So I'm going to type, a few choices here: red, green, and blue. Once I have my options in there, I'm going to click on the answer key icon in the lower left, and I'm going to assign a point value. So maybe I want this question to be worth 5 points, and I want to mark the correct answer. When I hit done, that little green check mark will show next to the one that I know is the correct answer. And that's also serves as a reminder to you to say, oh, I forgot to, do the answer key for this question. So you would simply go through, and add your questions all the way down the line. And remember, there are a variety of options, right? If you want the kids to be able to type a paragraph or at least type something like a short answer, you could choose any of these options here. Okay. So I'm not going to go through creating a um, you know, whole quiz. That's too long. However, once you have a Google form saved, the default view when you open it back up from your Google Drive is going to be the questions. But really, what you want to see, a lot of teachers asked me last year, I assigned all these forms, quizzes, but how do I see what they wrote down? And this is how you do that. You'd have to go back to the Google form yourself. Through Google Drive, you can search for the name of the form or whatever, however you would locate it. And instead of viewing the questions, you're going to view the responses. This sample Google form is not going to be very helpful to us because obviously I have no responses. But here's one over here that I used last year. And when I opened it from my Google Drive, this is how it appeared. This is exactly how I set up my Google form. I think there were 4 or 5 questions, something like that. But once I wanted to see what the answers were that got submitted, I choose this tab at the top for responses. I can see right away I had 38 responses. And if I click that tab, the default view is summary. Summary shows a list of everyone who responded. One of the things that I made mandatory was that it was going to record everybody's email address for me. So I now have a list of everyone's email. Then it took each question and it prepared either a pie graph or a bar graph or a list, depending on the type of answers that the kids were prompted to respond to. So this time, if they had to type something, so it really couldn't give me a bar graph, it just showed what all of the typed out responses were. Okay. So this gives me, sort of a view of what the responses are. I can also look at each individual question, and you could say, oh, I had 26 no responses and 12 yes responses to this particular question. And I can also look by individual. And again, it's sorted by student email address. So this happened to be the first student to respond. And if I were so inclined, I can scroll through and see each response that individual provided on the quiz. All of those options are good, but they're not great because as teachers, we need to see that quick view of everybody's answers, right? And the best way to do that is in the form of a spreadsheet. We don't have to do any work. Google Forms does that for us. So if we click the Google Sheets icon, it creates a spreadsheet for us. It already has a matching title. So this was the name of my Google form. Now I have a Google Sheet with the same name with the word responses in parentheses. And what it did was it took the date and time that the kid responded, and it sorted everything by email address and then the answers to each of the questions. Much better view. Now keep in mind, I did not follow my own advice last year with this particular form, and I did not make a question for the kids to type their names or their class period or their ELA teacher or whatever it was, right? If I had done that, I would be able to have
a more detailed chart that would be easier for me to see. If I forgot whose username this is, perhaps the next column would be, child's name, and then I can sort it that way. You could then, you know, organize this whole chart um, by last name. You can alphabetize, you can sort by class period, whatever you wanted to do. So, for example, if this was the child's last name, right? So let's say, this begins with an A. Um, I can just click inside column B. And when I go to data, I can choose sort sheet by column B, right? Because that was, or whatever column it is with the last name. I believe this is already sorted alphabetically. Let's see if it changes. Data, sort. Yeah, it was already sorted. So that's pretty much the only you know column that I can adjust. You guys, going forward, if you have that name or class period column, you can sort that way. If this was class period, I would click data, sort sheet by column C, A through Z, and it would put it in either number or alphabetical order for you. So this would be, a way for you to see everyone's answers. The one thing I forgot to say is once you've created your form, when you're ready to share it, how do you get that link to share with the kids? I completely forgot to share that. So I've created, let's say this is my 3-question quiz. I've added my answer key. I've done all of that. I'm going to click send when I'm ready to actually, post it in my Google Classroom as an assignment or something like that, or email it to students or whatever. Click send. And the very first option is one that you should try to remember to select: automatically collect respondents' email addresses, just in case you forget to add that name question on the quiz. At least you'll have some identifiable piece of information to say who gave you which response, right? So I'm going to put a check mark there. And I am going to choose link because I don't want to email this, in this case, to my students. I would like to post it in Google Classroom or, on my Google site or something like that, or on a Google slideshow. So once I click the little sideways paperclip looking thing, or the link icon, it shows the whole URL. Remember, every Google Doc and Google Slide and Google Form is given a URL because it's all in the cloud, right? It's web-based. So it's very long and it doesn't really matter what the link is, but if it bothers you, you can shorten it and then choose copy. And now I have this, copied to my clipboard so I could post it in my classroom or wherever I wanted. And that's how my students would have access to it. So I hope this was helpful. I hope it gave at least a quick overview of how to create a basic quiz and even, start using the features like answer key. It's very, very simple. Of course, there are much fancier things that you can do inside Google Forms, but we'll save all those things for another video.
For more tech tips to make your lives easier, you know where to find me.